Dratnos, today I've been grinding out in Zereth Mortis, and I'm beginning to learn to speak with the automa. I sent you my cipher, please respond.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Zereth Mortis Rep, which that's actually not the language thing. That language cipher thing, completely different system, not tied to power at all.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, yeah. But
Okay.
that's kind of the initial story that we got when the first interview with Morgan Day came out a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, so it was like the cipher of the first ones, which we didn't really know anything about at the time. Morgan Day basically said it will drive a majority of your outdoor content and will be available week one. The major goal is to incentivize exploration, though raiders should be able to ignore the system if they want to. No real player power will be attached to it. This was kind of really misconstrued. Like, people did not understand exactly what this meant because they didn't know much about the cipher and how the enlightened rep was a little bit different than the cipher. Now we know a lot. But this set expectations very early on that there was going to be no player power attached to Zereth Mortis as a whole, which now we know is not true.
Yeah, so we learned that, and there was some uproar from some parts of the internet, which is as much uproar as I don't know, like it was dumb, but people were angry when it got announced that there was a reputation, and there was some stuff behind it because of that cipher quote. But the cipher is still a system that doesn't have any player power tied to it. It's all just outdoor world stuff. There's some of those classic things that people hate, like time gating in that system as well. But to me, none of that is going to be a problem because it literally is just like combat buffs, exploration buffs, mini games in the outdoor world. Nothing that you can take with you into a raid or a dungeon.
Citation needed, but I think they actually removed the time gating on the cipher. Anyways, so
there's no time gating on your alts, but there still is on your main.
Oh, okay.
It's really nice for catch up. Yeah.
Anyhow, so moving forward, the next part of this story is they added the double legendaries to the reputation, and whenever it was initially added, the speculation, I don't even have the post on it right now, this is like something that happened later. The speculation was that it was going to take between 22 and 28 days of active play, and there was no rare reputation or anything like that. It was just daily quests that on average took between 15 and 20 minutes a day, depending on if you like flying or not. And this was going to be somewhere between a 22 and 28 day grind, but it required a lot of active playing. And there was a decent amount of pushback on this just because of, I think it was due to like bitterness of how long Korthia was. I know that I didn't like the time frame that the legendary would take, but I generally don't love the time frame that the legendary is going to come out just as a whole. I thought that like how it was coming out was kind of fine. I just didn't think it was I didn't think the legendary should come out with it. It was a little bit different of a complaint.
Yeah, Korthia was a longer grind than this as well for almost all cases, right? But it was a really big grind per day. Like Korthia, you could play Korthia for 3 hours each day and still not have quite gotten all of the rep, especially if do you remember the Relic Gorges and the Relic Gatherers, trying to get all 4 of those each day?
I killed none of those. I'm not gonna lie, I killed none of them.
Yeah, that zone was one where there was serious rewards associated with spending a lot of time in there every single day for like a month or more. None of the versions of Zereth Mortis that we saw, even this one, were really approaching that level of grind, but there was some similarities, and they actually then increased that further later on as well.
Yeah. And so then Blizzard decided that the community feedback it at least had merit, or they thought that it could be a good direction for how they wanted to go. And one of the major things that a lot of people said is, why are you locking this behind 22 to 28 days of actual in-game play? And instead, why don't you put it behind the campaign? Blizzard ended up agreeing, and then they locked it behind chapter 7 of the campaign, which in my mind, this is a very fair solution. It doesn't punish people for players who can only play 3 or 4 days a week. If you want to play at your own pace, you're not going to perpetually be behind a lot. And to be frank, double legendary is really fun. And I think gating people like longer than they need to be behind not having it, especially whenever their friends have it, I don't think it's a great look.
Yeah, so it's worth noting there is still rep power with the legendary, right? But on chapter 7 of the campaign, which can be completed on the 5th week of the patch or the 3rd week of the mythic raid being open, you will get the belt without needing any rep. And that belt, it's like 265. It's a legendary belt. It has the Memory of Unity power on it. But If you want the ability to craft Memory of Unity onto another slot, and you want to be able to craft it at 292, which is
Yes.
obviously a lot more item levels, and you can move it onto a slot that has more item levels. You can move it onto a slot that has your worst non-legendary piece as well to get an even bigger relative upgrade. So, we're talking about a sizable couple percentage points of damage on that kind of move. That will still require Revered, but it will require Revered and the Chapter 7 to be completed, which creates a lot of slack in the system, right? Because, in Korthia, if I did twice as many rares as you did per day, I would get my sockets and conduits in half the time, roughly, right? Because
Well,
the bi-weeklies and the weeklies were so little of the rep. Whereas in Zereth Mortis, if you did, if with that system, if you did twice as much per day, you would still get it at the same time as somebody who was doing some but not all, because they were going to get to you were gated behind the chapter as well, right?
yeah.
But
And so now double legendary is out of the equation. We move forward with the reputation, and they add rares to the enlightened rep as a way to be able to gain that enlightened rep, right?
yeah, so they before this change had come in, the rares weren't giving guaranteed rep, although they did drop some rep RNG tokens, somewhat reminiscent of Korthia sometimes, from what we could tell at the early PTR. But then they made the rares give a lot of reputation, and this is the kind of thing that a lot of people do not like when the rep grind involves going over the whole zone and killing every single rare that's on the map and standing in a cave waiting for Zelnathop to spawn and then killing Zelnathop and then going to the next rare spot and waiting for that rare to spawn and killing that rare. And so the more relative rep is coming from the rares, the more likely that your play pattern is going to turn into that, which is why this change was one that I wasn't hugely in favor of. But it's worth noting it wasn't going to be the same as Korthia because of the way that the rep was different, right? Because the way the rep was also gated by the chapter, there was diminishing returns past a certain point of rep per day.
In addition to that, Korthia had sockets and conduits, and sockets are hugely powerful. The stuff that you're gaining from this is the reputation that you're getting from this is very minimal. You're getting conduits, which is, I guess, similar power to that of Korthia. This is like a conduit suite, though, that you have to have either first off, you have to have Exalted with the Enlightened, which is not a short grind to begin with.
Yeah, the longer the grind is, the worse it is if the rares are involved, right? Because now you're having to kill every single rare for 50 days instead of for 20.
Yeah. But in addition to that, it was also gated behind having either all 20, every dungeon on a level 20 be done. You either had to have Gladiator, which is also not an easy feat, or kill Mythic Jailer. And so these are all things that are, for a lot of players, going to happen pretty late into the patch and are going to be something that I think your most dedicated players are going to be doing this just generally.
There are relatively few players who will accomplish one of those and then still really care about getting a couple of days of advantage on getting their conduits all upgraded. It's a very narrow band of people who can get to Exalted, can get Keystone Hero, and are working on Mythic the Jailer and want to get the power spike for that, which that's a band of 10 guilds in the world top 100 that are, just in the sweet spot where that's relevant.
Yeah, so whenever the Zereth Mortis rares now started to grant Enlightened Rep, we saw a lot of pushback on this, and in reality, I'm be real, I kind of felt like it was unwarranted just because of the amount of power. I understand why it happened. It happened because player power was attached to it, so people are going to feel obligated to grind this in general. But the amount of player power that is attached to the Enlightened Rep, I didn't fully understand what the pushback what was the reason that the amount of it happened was because I didn't get it.
The system as a whole wasn't going to be bad even with this, but I do think that the rares becoming juiced, becoming the important thing to be doing, was a thing that made the grind worse. It didn't take it from good to bad, it took it from pretty good to slightly less good, but it still did make it worse. And if you were hearing that change in isolation, and you didn't know, not a lot of people know about all the intricacies of how the new rep on the PTR works, right? So you just heard oh, there's going to be a bunch of rares that give a bunch of rep on the next one. You're like, oh man, it's going to be Korthia again, right?
Yeah,
so I think that was where a lot of the angst came from.
I tend to agree, but Blizzard actually ended up agreeing with some of the pushback. And dude, this development cycle, it has been really good. They've been giving a lot of feedback and a lot of their reasoning, and the reason that so they changed the amount of reputation that the rares give and bumped up the reputation that the quests give. And now this will allow players to feel like they can be done for a day earlier without significant long-term cost. This is a great solution. Like, I don't want to be grinding Korthia, Zereth Mortis, whatever, a lot. And players who feel the need to reach Revered by week 5 and get the legendary memory as soon as chapter 7 ends should now be able to rest assured even without killing a single rare. And so this is honestly the best solution that they could have come up with in my mind.
Yeah, notably, it's not that, there's not going to be stuff to do, there's not going to be a grind or something like that. People, the reactionary response to this, right, is like, oh, people just don't want to grind an MMO. It's people, I think, largely understand that there's going to be stuff to do in an MMO that's important. Obviously, I mean, on the far side, there's people that don't even want any of that kind of stuff. But here it's, this is going to be a rep that if you do the big objectives, right, if you do the dailies, if you do the world quest, if you do the world boss, if you do the bi-weekly quest, you're good, right? That will get you to Revered in time for it to matter. And you don't need to go and sit all around the map for 2 hours every day hunting every single rare, which pure upside as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, this is a great change. And I think another of many such changes on this PTR cycle that are kind of uncharacteristic, right? This is something that we don't usually see in PTR cycles is this degree of flexibility before the patch comes out. Usually we see a little bit more stubbornness and a little bit more waiting until 2 months after the patch comes out to fix some things about Korthia.
I think that this is probably the best solution that we could get. So I guess moving forward, the only real thing to be learned from this, at least in my mind, is like maybe Blizzard should go to more weekly/bi-weekly like major sources of rep. Like I'm kind of down for like the dailies being the biggest source of the reputation, and then if you really want to, you can continue to grind some of the rares if you want to continue to push yourself a little bit further forward. But I would be kind of down for even a weekly or bi-weekly like source of reputation if they're going to stay on this model of like zone activities, I guess is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I would love to see a model where the rares don't contribute at all to like doing it as fast as possible, but maybe do contribute to catching up if you've missed dailies or some weeklies.
Okay.
But there's reasons that they don't like doing that. They've implemented systems like that in the past, and a lot of people who aren't like me don't like the feeling of being capped on how much they can get per day or per week or something like that. So they feel like systems like that are, artificial time gates and caps on how much they can earn and that kind of stuff, which I like those systems because it's caps on how much I have to do to be optimizing. But there's very different perspectives that people have here. And I think system like this is a really good way of bridging that gap and hitting a good middle ground where we're all happy, hopefully.
So where do you think we've landed on Zereth Mortis as a whole? Do you think we've landed on that spot where everybody can, this is about the best system that we're going to get? Because that's where I think we've landed as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's still grumbling that you'll see in some places that I see in some places. I think some of that's misinformed and will go away as the patch actually comes out. And some of it is just, legitimately, you're never going to please everybody. But from where I'm sitting, Zereth Mortis seems 5 tiers above Korthia, 4 tiers above the Maw. Even a bit better than like Broken Shore, Argus, those kinds
world quests
of zones back in the day.
How do you think it shakes up compared to just like general world quests on expansion launch?
I think it's probably. I mean, something might be wrong with me because I did kind of enjoy doing AP world quest swoops, but even still, I like just objectively better than doing those.
Well, I would definitely call you demented because I think that this is a lot better of a system. I think for me, it's tough because like if they don't want to put any player power behind it, people are just not going to do it. At the same time,
I think this is a great compromise where it's like there's some nice things to get that like most people will want to get, but it's not like you feeling this pull of 5% DPS that is 2 months of killing every rare away, and you're just like trudging like a zombie towards it, making no progress if you don't kill rares for a day. Like here is like, if you decide to just do the bi-weeklies, like you're going to be a little bit slower, but you're still going to get there, right? By just doing the world quests and world boss even.
I personally have a dispute with like the legendary being gated as long as it realistically is behind the campaign at week 7. But that's nothing to do with like Zereth Mortis Rep's fault. That's just like a personal preference for when I think that the legendary should come out on like the time frame of the patch, which is, I think that if they're looking for a model for like reputation moving forward, I do think the Zereth Mortis model is definitely one that I hope they continue to adopt. They could even look to improve this. I don't think that this is like perfect, but I think this is a hell of a lot better than anything we've gotten in a while.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We want to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. Are you the grumbling people that Dratnos has alluded to a couple times that still is not happy with this? If you are still not happy with this, why? If not, if you're super stoked about Zereth Mortis and looking to grind your cipher and talk to your robots, a completely separate system, by the way, also let us know. In the meantime, we hope you guys all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.